Hello! I got a new car. Well, I got a new car back in November, but I haven't talked about it till now because I wanted to do a bit of a long-term test to tell you a bit more about this car. It's the first car I've got in 6 years. The last car I got was December 2018 when I bought a Tesla Model 3. And that was back in the US. My wife and I normally live in the US, in Seattle, but we've been very fortunate. We've managed to take some time and go and live back in the UK for a while. And so back in November, we moved to the UK and we're going to be here for another couple of months and then we're going to go back to the US. But we had about 6 months, so we thought, why not? Well, we need a car. If you're going to be here for 6 months and we're in the middle of nowhere, so we need to get a car. So we thought that we would try and get one. We thought originally about going to car hire, or what's that? There's a website where you can do long-term hire of cars. None of those seemed to work out. They were very expensive. And also you can go and do leasing services. Again, long-term leasing, those don't really work either. It was very expensive. So we decided it would probably be cheaper just to buy a car, have it for 6 months, insure it, and then sell it after 6 months, which is what we're going to do. We're going to sell this car in another couple of months. So before I decided to go and buy a car, I put out a community question to all of you viewers to say, what kind of car should I get? And I gave you my criteria. Here they are. So first of all, I wanted something about the size of a Golf. I like smaller cars. I wanted a practical hatchback. So I thought that would be a good choice. Big cars tend not to do very well in England because there's small parking spaces, things like that. And to be honest, I'm not a fan of big cars. Even though my channel's called Big Car, I actually prefer smaller cars. So something about the size of a Golf was just about right. It also had to be less than 6 years old. So I had my eye on something like a Volvo V40, but I think those finished in around 2018. I'm not a fan of crossovers, so I didn't really want a crossover. They do crossover and things like that, but they're too top heavy. They don't really work. I wanted a lower car, and those seem to be a rare breed nowadays. But anyway, it had to be less than 6 years old because I didn't want all the inherent problems that you get from older cars. I wanted a newer car. And although this car's only 4 years old, we've still had problems with this car, but I'll get to that in a little bit. I wanted to have Apple CarPlay because I like plugging in my smartphone and being able to just use Google Maps, use all the music on my system, play podcasts, play audiobooks, things like that. That's what I want to have in a car experience, and it works way better than whatever the auto manufacturers decided that they want to put in for their system. I wanted to have heated front seats in the front, and that was really because we're going through a winter in Britain and I know it gets very cold. The car's going to be parked outside. Whenever you get into it, it's going to be incredibly cold, so I wanted to be able to heat up quickly. I also wanted climate control because I just want to set it and forget it HVAC system. I love climate control. Just set the temperature and it does the rest. My wife, on the other hand, she's constantly fiddling with things. But for me, that's what I like. I like climate control. I don't like to be continually fiddling with things. Finally, we wanted electrically operated front seats, or a driver's seat. And that was really because both my wife and I are very different sizes, very different heights. And so we have very different settings, seat settings. And so I wanted to not have to continually manually adjust it because we've only got one car. We don't want to buy 2 cars while we're here. So we didn't want to be constantly changing that. We wanted the car to do it. That was actually the major sticking point with a lot of the cars that we looked at. A lot of the cars had all the features that I've just talked about, but they didn't have electrically operated driver's seat. Another thing that we discovered that we wanted after I did that poll was we wanted an automatic gearbox. I'm not a big fan of automatic gearboxes, particularly the classical ones, because there's so much lag in getting the power. And that's why I prefer a manual gearbox or an electric car which has instant torque, which works really well. But a standard automatic gearbox is not that great. But the problem with England is there's so much stop-go traffic, and I knew I was going to be doing a lot of driving. So I knew I was going to be stuck in traffic and constantly inching forward. And manual gearboxes are terrible for that. You're constantly on the clutch. So anyway, we decided that we wanted to have an automatic gearbox, and I really wanted a DSG, which is those instant upshift automatic gearboxes. I thought that would work very well. So you guys gave some great suggestions. I really appreciate some of the suggestions you gave, things that I wouldn't have thought about. One of them was the Mercedes A-Class, and I'm not a big Mercedes fan, to be honest, and that's probably just a historical thing. I remember going with my dad in the 80s to see a Mercedes, and it was really expensive. It had no features in the car, and the dealer was like, well, this is it, take it or leave it, we're Mercedes, and very sort of, you know, nose in the air kind of thing. It's amazing how little things like that can put you off something for life. That, and also the incredibly weird naming system that Mercedes had for their cars. Both of those have just left me cold for Mercedes, which is a shame, because the A-Class, we decided to try it. I loved it. I love that car. It's fantastic. We found a nearly new model, a 2024 nearly new one, and it drove beautifully. It has a DSG automatic. I wanted to get it, but unfortunately, Mrs. Big Car, my wife, she just couldn't get comfortable in the seats, and so we had to knock that one on the head. So we ended up going for the second best, which is the Mazda3, and I love this car. It works really well. It's a fantastic car. So anyway, let me show you a little bit more around the car. So first of all, it's the right size. It's a hatchback, and it works really well for us. Secondly, it's black, which wouldn't have been my choice. My wife had a black Ford Escort back in the late 80s, the early 90s, because it was a Mark V model, whatever that one is. Yeah, that thing attracted dirt. At least it showed dirt really badly, black. So I always ignored black as a colour, just like I wanted to ignore white as a colour, again for showing dirt. And this one certainly shows the dirt, which is the reason why I haven't bothered to wash it for you, I'm afraid. It looks really dirty because it will always look dirty. I could go and wash this right now, and 5 minutes later it will look like this. So there really wasn't much point in cleaning it. Plus the car washes are miles away from here, and I'm not very good at washing cars. So it is what it is. Also, every time I come to the car, I have to go around the back and I have to wipe the lens on the camera, because for some reason this car gets very dirty. In fact, around here it gets incredibly dirty to a point where you can't even see the license plate. But even with a light bit of dirt, it throws the dirt up into the lens of the camera. So when you're trying to reverse and you're using the cameras to see where you're going, you can't see where you're going because there's just a little bit of dirt, and there's just enough dirt that it makes it so you can't see what's going on. So every time I come to the car, I wipe the rear lens. And this didn't seem to happen on my Tesla Model 3. I'm not constantly doing that with that car. So admittedly, maybe it's a bit less dirty on the roads in Seattle, but it's a real challenge for this car, and maybe the position of the camera could have been put a bit better. It also has this Sky Active X badge, proudly talking about the fact that Mazda have this Sky Active X technology. I've been doing research on cars for 6 years now, and I think one time, a couple of years ago, I had to look it up and I found out what it was and then promptly forgot. And I had to look it up again to find out exactly what Sky Active X was for this video. And it's basically better fuel economy. It goes into lots of technical detail, which I'm not really interested in, but it's rather ridiculous that they've decided to put this badge on the back of the car to talk about, you know, oh, it's this wonderful technology. I'm sure you've got some great technology in your car, Mazda, but you don't need to put a badge on the back of the car just to talk about it, because no one really understands what it is. And so what's the point in doing it? Anyway, that's my 2p, my 2 cents about Sky Active X and the pointlessness of it. Let me show you the back seats, which are back seats, and they're fine. It's a little bit tight to get in the back, but mostly we don't have people in the back, so it's not a major consideration, at least for us. But there's a 60-40 split rear seat, and those work very effectively. It's a normal kind of hatchback. It would have been nice if these seats could go forwards, because then you could get those seats a bit lower and get a bit more space in. But with the boot space, it's pretty good. It works quite well. Can't really complain about the boot space, particularly with the seats down. There's loads of room. We've our daughter's over here and we've had to move her a couple of times. We've thrown everything in the back of this car, and we could actually put her in the 60-40 split, so we could put her in the 40 split and then get everything else around her, and that's worked really well. Loads of room, very practical car. I'm not that bothered about the outside of the car. I'm a lot more interested about the inside of the car, which is why I've actually cleaned the inside of the car, where I didn't clean the outside of the car. And so for me, this is what's really all important. I need the controls to be logical, easy to use. I want a great driving experience. I want it to be a sporty, engaging drive. And that's what I've got from this setup. It's a really nice interior, works very well. It's very black, but then you're going to get a lot of black interiors nowadays. But it works very well. So the Mazda 3 includes Apple CarPlay, which is great. Unfortunately, it's not a touchscreen, although you can actually reach out and touch it. They've used one of these control things here, which Apple CarPlay supports, but honestly, it's not the best way of doing things. It's not very obvious. I mean, it's not clear that that's currently highlighting the navigation system. Especially while you're driving, you can't see that. And so when you're desperately trying to go and select a podcast or something like this, while you're trying to drive, and you go over, or you're trying to navigate, if you're trying to navigate and you're over here and you think you're on the left hand side but you're not, and you click over here, then trying to get back while you're trying to drive, trying to do all this stuff is very, very difficult. It's not the best system in the world. So I mean, touchscreen is a way better way of doing it, but it is what it is, and I mean, for an Apple CarPlay system, it works very well. One thing that would have been nice as far as charging the phone would have been to have the touch base, the Qi charging base somewhere there, which the Mercedes A-Class had, but then that's a newer car. It's a 2024 car. This is a 2020 car. I completely understand that. That technology hadn't really arrived into cars at that point. So it would have been nice to have, but unfortunately we didn't have that. If you disconnect the system, the phone, you have just the built-in entertainment, which you've got radio and things like that, DAB. You can do Bluetooth, and you can go through the phone and do that. And the navigation, it's fine, it works okay. The problem is that built-in navigation is never going to be as good as something like Google Maps, because although the navigation system in the Mazda 3 has traffic information, it's getting traffic information over the RDS, FM and DAB system, which is great. It's providing traffic data on roads, but it can't give the same amount of detail in which roads are which speed than something like Google Maps can. And I should know, because I was the person maintaining the system for the RDS system, and so I know exactly what roads were covered and which ones weren't, or at least I did at the time, back when I was doing it through a company called Inrix. So it's good, but I will always prefer something like Google Maps. It's always going to provide better coverage. As far as voice control, there's...
Say a command.
It's fine. It's the normal weird voice control thing that doesn't work very well. I'll always go for the Apple wake up word thing, which I'm not going to say right now. That works a lot better. I can control things a lot better. Anyway, the Mazda 3 has lots and lots of controls to try and improve your driving. It's called iActive Sense. They're supposed to help you drive and make sure that you can't crash, and to me they're a mixed bag. Some bits of them are good and some bits of them maybe not so good. So I'll go through every single one. I went to look at the owner's manual and looked what is Active Sense, and eye active sense and what are all the things you get. So here are all the things you get. First of all, you get a 360-degree camera. Well, I don't get that. That's not a feature on the car. We get a reversing camera, and that's fine, works fine, but we don't get 360-degree view, which is fine. I don't need it. Apparently there's adaptive LED headlights, which apparently make it easier to see at night, focus on the right parts of the road. I've never noticed it do anything different, so I'm not sure if this even has it, or if it does have it, I haven't noticed, and it hasn't seemed to make much of a difference. It does have a high beam, what they call high beam control system. It's essentially, it's automatic high beam. So normally, obviously, you get your flashes and your high beam by doing that. If you press on this button, apparently you can turn the automatic high beam on off, the feature on and off. It doesn't work for me, although quite frankly I don't know what this thing's doing, because it should be doing that. There's a little thing that seems to have an auto high beam thing here. It doesn't work, so I'm really not happy with this. And to be honest, the auto high beam is terrible. And my Tesla, it works really well. It's very good at noticing when there's no one else coming, and then it puts the high beams on, and then when there's a car coming, it automatically turns them off. This thing is terrible. It's constantly dazzling people. So one of the first things I had to do as a safety feature was to try and turn it off. And as I say, I tried using this button to turn it off, and it didn't really work. For some reason, now it's off. I don't quite know why it's off. I think I went into settings and I made sure I turned the setting off to do it, but auto high beam in this car is terrible, doesn't work very well at all. There's an adjustable speed limiter feature. So you can program the car to not go over a certain speed, but that seems to be of very little use to me. Different roads have different speeds, so surely you'd only set it to like motorway speed. So for example, the motorway speed here is 70 miles an hour, so you'd set it to maybe 70 or 75 or something like that. But why do you want to have something that won't allow you to go over a certain speed? Because what happens if you want to get out of trouble? If suddenly you have to accelerate to get around a problem, I don't want to have the car stopping me doing that. Now there is kind of a kick down feature where if you just slam your foot on the accelerator, then it will override it and do it. Weirdly enough, it will also override it if you take your seatbelt off. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But I don't know, if I didn't slam the accelerator down fully, but I'm still trying to accelerate to get out of a problem, I don't want a system to try and not give me the acceleration I need at the time when I need it. So I really don't understand why people would ever want to have that feature. And I certainly haven't enabled it. There is blind spot monitoring, which we had on our Volvo XC90, and it was really useful there. It's also very useful in this car as well. So there's little lights that appear in both the left-hand and the right-hand mirror. And there's also a heads-up system. So this car is included with a heads-up display system. And with that system, you also get notified which side of the car there's potential cars that you need to be worried about. And it particularly tells you if you're trying to indicate, it warns you that there could be a problem that you could potentially hit another car. Really good system, works really well. Good job, Mazda. There's also something called cruising and traffic support. This, and there's a few other things which talk about this as well, but it's adaptive cruise control. So normally with cruise control, I'm sure you're aware of cruise control where it will just speed up to a certain speed, but then it won't actually brake. Well, now adaptive cruise control systems that are coming in will also automatically brake to make sure that you're the right distance from another car. And this works very well. And there's a little control here. I know all the controls to turn on adaptive cruise control that work very well. And you can turn up the speed and turn down the speed easily. You can make it so you can be further apart from the car in front or closer to it, and those will work really well. Very happy with that system. One of the problems is, of course, you want to use it when you're in traffic. So when you're in a lot of congestion, when you're going maybe 50 miles an hour, maybe even 40 miles an hour, and then things slow down even more. The problem is when you get to a standstill, the system turns itself off, or it does after a few seconds. So if you're in really heavy traffic and then you're stopped, then when you go again, you have to turn the system on, and then you stop again, so you turn it off, and then you start again so you turn it on. And so you can end up in that sort of condition of just not having it on, in which case it's not really helping you. It's not really making it easier to drive. I want these systems to take the drudgery out of things like that. And it's not really working very effectively for that. There's also something to help keep you in the lane, where it'll move the wheel to help you get back in the lane. I haven't used that very much, and to be honest, I don't really trust it. So I wouldn't really be relying on that to do anything. I certainly wouldn't use it to be getting it to steer me on the motorway. Having said that, I mean, I've driven 70 plus miles on auto drive, whatever the Tesla system is, autopilot. I actually had it drive from my house all the way to my destination, and other than parking, it did all of the driving, and it was pretty good. There are still times with autopilot when it just gets it completely wrong, so you really have to be paying attention, but it's a much better system than what we've got on Mazda, but then this system on Mazda is not. This isn't the bee's knees for auto driving. This is a fairly basic setup. There's also something called distance and speed alert. It tells you if you're driving too close to the vehicle ahead. The thing is, I already know if I'm driving too close to the vehicle ahead, and I don't really need this tech. To be honest, I've never seen it warn me, so I'm not sure if it's actually enabled on this system or whether it actually works or not, but I've never seen it. One problem I have had is when I've been crawling in traffic really slowly. If I get a little bit too close to the car ahead when I'm stopped, then it'll change the display, this display here, to show essentially what you've got when you're very close to a traffic bollard or some other piece of furniture, and it'll show the car with the little sensors on it, which I suppose is useful. The problem is I'm trying to look at navigating to work out where I am and what I need to go, or if I'm stopped, I also may want to do something with the entertainment system or the telephone to work out, to use that. And I can't because this thing's beeping to tell me that I'm too close to something else. That's not that helpful. The next one is driver attention alert. It detects fatigue and warns the driver. I've never seen that, and I hope it's on this car, and I hope it detects me if I'm ever fatigued. And that would be a great thing to have, but I've never seen it, so I can't talk about it. There's something called front cross traffic alert. It's supposed to help you if you're trying to turn out of a T-junction and you can't really see to the left or the right, to make sure that cars aren't going to hit you. Going out of the driveway of the place where we live, it's not very easy. It's fairly blind, and it's also quite a fast road. But I've never had this thing alert me that there's a car coming. So either it's not working properly or I don't have it. I don't know what. But it does have it on the rear, because I've definitely seen it on the rear when I've been going in and reversing and there's been cars behind me passing by. It will have little indicators here to tell me that there are cars around, and it will tell me where they're coming from. So it's certainly there on the rear, so you would think it's also there on the front, but it doesn't seem to be working on the front, or if it is enabled, it's not working very well, because it certainly doesn't work. There's something called Intelligent Speed Assist, which will control the speed to a certain amount plus or minus the speed limit. I've never used it on this car. To be honest, I didn't even know it was on this car until I actually started researching it. And I use it on my Tesla, but to be honest, when I actually looked and found this feature in the Mazda manual, there were so many pages of instructions. I'm not sure I even want to go and set it up. It just seems very complicated. And that's part of the problem with some of these systems, is that you've got so many of these things. And I mean, I'm quite a techie person, and I go through and read the manual. Or at least I've read half the manual when I first got the car, and then I got bored. And that's the thing, most people probably don't know most of the things that are on their car. And so this setting here, I guarantee you 90% of people probably don't even know it exists on the car that they bought, and yet they paid money for it. and they're probably never going to use it. And the other people, the 10% who actually do know about it, probably don't care about using it. So it's probably a very low take-up rate of people that actually use these features. There's also the lane departure warning system. So if you go out of the lane, then it'll warn you. Now, I drive on country roads, and they're fairly narrow roads, but they have a line down the middle. And when it's safe to do so, I go relatively fast on the roads. And you don't want to stick right over to the left-hand side because you're going to hit potholes. It's actually going to be more dangerous to do that. It's better to go more in the middle of the road while you're trying to drive, when it's safe to do so, because you can see up ahead that there's no cars coming and there's nothing coming out. So the problem is the lane departure warning system is constantly telling me that I'm out of my lane and I'm doing the wrong thing. So it's these false positives which really don't work very well. And so I've never had this system pop up for when I've been driving on multi-lane roads like dual carriageways or motorways, but then I'm sticking in my lane, I'm doing the right thing. But the one time that I'm doing something incorrect, it's dinging me about it, and so it makes me want to turn that feature off, which isn't good. Turning any of these safety things off is a bad idea. And talking about that, there's something called smart brake support. So if you're going to hit something ahead or behind, it'll warn you, and then in really serious cases, it'll actually slam the brakes on for you. British roads are narrow with parked cars, so if you go down the road, you need to dodge them and you need to let people come and go, and a car may stop on the other side of the road and let you pass so you can sort of go on the wrong side of the road and then come back in. The problem is this brake warning system will fire because it thinks you're about to hit that car that you're about to hit on the wrong side of the road, when actually you're going to go in and it's perfectly safe. And so I get all these false positives on, brake, 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 this thing popping up on my heads-up system saying brake. And the problem with all these false positives is you then start ignoring them. In my Tesla, I get it much more than I get in the Mazda. It's constantly warning me of things that really have no impact. And so, again, you just start ignoring them. And that's the problem. It's like the boy that cried wolf. You end up having a car which has safety features which you ignore, and then if something really important happens, you've ignored it, in which case what's the point in having the safety feature in the first place? So I have occasionally had it where it's actually slammed on the brakes because it thought I wasn't going to stop. I was going to stop, but that's a bit of a shock. But again, I'm glad I have it. That's a good feature, and it's never particularly slammed on the brakes when it hasn't been a real need for it. So that's a good thing. So that's everything in iActive Sense, or whatever the thing's called. There is one feature of this car which I wasn't expecting. Well, I didn't buy for this feature, but I found really useful, which is the heated steering wheel control. And what it does is it heats up this part and this part of the steering wheel. This is really good, particularly obviously in the winter. It's really good in the winter. When you've got a very cold car, my hands get cold very quickly, and having this to keep my hands warm, it warms up really quickly, and it's a great feature. Love it. There's also the start-stop button here for the car, and that's fine. It works fine. One of the problems I have with it is, say you're driving, you pull in, you stop, and what you're meant to do is you're meant to put it in park and press the start-stop button to turn it off. Works fine, works great. But if you're in drive and you do it in the wrong order, so you press the start-stop button, it tells you gear selector lever not in park, which is fine. So okay, I'll put it in park. But then you try and get out and it says the car's still on because it hasn't turned it off properly. So you now have to turn the car back on, and then you have to turn it off again to make it work. Why it does that, I don't know. It should presumably, if you just put it in park, it should say, okay, you've already pressed the off button, now it's going to be, the car's off. So that's not that great, but you know, that's just one of the weird deficiencies of the car. It's something easy that Mazda could fix. As far as driving the car, it's really fun. It's a low down car. It handles on twisty A roads really well. The automatic gearbox is the thing that lets it down. The problem is I wanted a DSG automatic, and this is not a DSG automatic. This is the thing that was really stopping me buying the Mazda and preferring the Mercedes, because the problem is there's always that lag. There's always the lag of trying to go in the right gear, which the automatic just doesn't get right, and the DSG is so instantaneous and works so well. So that's a bit of a shame. It would have been nice if it had that, but oh well, you can't have everything with a car, can you? So now to a few problems that we've had with the car. The first problem is that the doors on the car, they seem to just be a little bit low. They just seem to stick a little, particularly on the driver's side. And we took it into the dealer to try and work out what's going on. They said, oh, that's a warranty claim. Oh, we'll get that done for free. And they then came back and said, oh, actually, no, it isn't under the warranty claim and Mazda won't pay for it. Oh, by the way, it's £700. So whether we get two slightly sticking doors or one slightly sticking door done for £700, I don't think that's going to happen. Another problem was we had a problem with this mirror here, where we have automatic mirrors on this car, so it will automatically fold in. The problem is the motor had a problem, and even if I turned the automatic door mirror thing off, it would still for some reason move. I don't know why. It shouldn't be doing. Anyway, when it was fully out, the problem is it would move itself in a little bit and then it wouldn't go out again. So constantly when you got in the car, you constantly had to get the passenger to try and move the mirror so you could see on this side, so you could see what was going on, or else you'd have to stop and try and do it yourself. Again, not that great. That was done under warranty and they did that for free. So now they got it wrong twice. First of all, they got the wrong door mirror, so I had to go in a second time after waiting 2 hours or an hour or 2 hours or whatever it was to be able to go and do that. So then we found out they got the right one, but they hadn't got the right part. So after a third time, it was finally done. But there was a lot of, it's not the closest Mazda dealer, this place, so it was a bit of a pain in the bottom to go and do that several times. The bigger problem we've had is I had a check engine light come on, the little yellow check engine light, and for some reason it's come on and then it's gone off again, and then it's gone on again, and then it's gone off. As soon as it went on, I was really worried because it said, you know, stop the car or get it serviced as soon as possible, whatever the message was, but it seemed fairly important. So I phoned up the garage, they put it on their machine to work out what was going on, and it's something to do with the port injectors need to be replaced or cleaned or something. There's a problem with that. Again, they said that they would look to try and do it on warranty, and then Mazda came back and said, well, that's not within the normal wear of the car. It's 4 years old, it shouldn't be having that, so you need to, the owner needs to pay for that. Now, this is a fast car. It's sold as a fast car. Presumably, you should be able to drive it as a fast car. It's only 4 years old. How much build-up can happen in 4 years on a car like this? So I would argue this is probably more of a Mazda problem than a driver problem. I mean, I didn't have this, I haven't had this car from new. I don't know what the other person's been doing, but even if they've been driving it on racetracks for 4 years, I mean, this car should not be at a position where it's having dirty or bad port injectors that need fixing. This is, in my mind, a warranty thing. Anyway, just to get rid of the problem, which is probably a good idea if we're going to be doing a lot more driving with it, we do need to get that one sorted out. That's going to be £1,000, so that's not that great. But anyway, overall, love the car. It's been a great car for us, certainly the past 4 months that we've been driving it, and for the next couple of extra months that we're going to be driving it, hopefully it'll be a trouble-free driving, and yeah. Anyway, that's all about the Mazda 3 that I can tell you. I'll see you in the next video.